I think especially the women, that gut feeling that you have that something might not be quite right is usually a sign that any of these signs are probably happening, and it could be a reason to break up.
Welcome to Breaking Money Silence, a podcast series aimed at helping all of us talk more openly about money. Your host, Kathleen Kingsbury, is a wealth psychology expert who is doing what she does best, speaking about taboo topics. International speaker, author, and founder of KBK Wealth Connection, Kathleen understands money and our relationship with it. Now, here is Kathleen.
Hi, this is Kathleen Kingsbury, the host of the Breaking Money Silence podcast. This year in 2024, we're doing a special series all year long on unleashing your true value, specifically designed to help women advisors and related financial professionals identify and communicate their value so they can earn more, be more profitable, and have greater financial well-being. We're going to have guests from the financial services industry, coaches, consultants, people who can give you a different perspective and offer different tactics for unleashing your true value so you can feel better about making sales, feel better about earning more, and ultimately we can close the gender wage gap in the wealth management industry. So I thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this week's episode. Today, I am with Alanah Phillips. She helps advisors know when it's time to break up with their broker-dealer. I just love that. So I coach and work with a lot of women advisors these days. And sometimes, you know what, a relationship is worth saving and sometimes it isn't. So I'm looking forward to getting Alanah's input. Also know that she is a speaker, a podcast host herself. Her podcast is Next Gen 10. And I love this that she has in her bio. She's a self-described, quote unquote, industry troublemaker. As somebody who likes to talk about taboo topics, I'm excited to introduce you to Alanah Phillips. Welcome, Alanah, to the podcast.
Thank you, Kathleen. As somebody who I would also consider to be a troublemaker, I am always glad to hang out with you.
Yes. And so today we're going to talk about a topic that is really part of the Unleash Your True Value concept, which is really about, women advisors standing in their value, communicating their value. And sometimes you're in a system or you're working for a particular firm where no matter what you do, they're not going to be able to recognize that value. And it's time to move on. So before we get too into the tactics and logistics, let me just ask you, why are you passionate about this? How did you get to a place where you're like, I'm going to be the person who gives relationship advice to women when they want to break up with their broker-dealer?
Yeah, there's so many stories, Kathleen, that I look at, and I've been doing this particular kind of recruiting since 2018. I also do recruiting with inexperienced folks and helping to coach them. But, for the folks that are navigating these breakups, I think about there was a woman who was in my network early on, 2018. We met an acquaintance through WIFS, which is Women in Insurance and Financial Services. She called me after we had met each other because she was at an RIA. They were promising her partnership, and then that kept not happening. And when she talked to me, she had asked my advice about taking a job at an insurance company because she had started to look out at other opportunities, and she had a background in insurance and was just going to go be an employee somewhere else. And there were a series of questions, which has now become what I call the advisor risk tolerance assessment that we use to try to figure out what type of advisor somebody might be best suited for. We found out she was bringing in new business right and left. She'd go to the nail salon. She'd come back with a client. She had the risk capacity. She had a husband who had a job. They had the mobility at this point in their life because they didn't have kids. They were willing to sell their house. Again, all the factors in their life sort of led to her having the opportunity to take some risk. And we talked through those options for her that maybe had higher risk and higher reward, therefore, that came with them, and decided to take one of them. So she moved firms. She went to an independent broker dealer. She joined a team that had a little more control. She owned her practice. She had some struggle leaving her firm because they did have a fairly restrictive contract, but she was in, 2018, 2019 making 150,000, Kathleen, and it's wild. Like literally this morning she texted me because we are very, very good friends now. We travel together and are in group messages, and she texted me this morning. Her trailing 12 revenue just hit $775,000.
Wow. How
Yeah.
exciting for her and for you.
I know. She's going to be $1 million producer next year. Like, she wanted to have this practice that she could control. And we talked about her dream scenario and like have a baby. And she's got 2 cities that she lives in and works in. And like, her text to me this morning is like, dreams are freaking possible, And so like that, those text messages, and the fact that Kathleen, she thinks that somehow I had something to do with this. Like, I could give myself a little pat on the back, like pretending that I had anything to do with it is, part of what makes me so passionate about it, because to see that happen for the women and advisors in my life that these sorts of situations play out this way is extremely gratifying.
Yes, no, absolutely. And you did have a role in it. I mean, ultimately, she's the one who produced the revenue, but certainly I think it's a big deal when there's other women willing to meet with these women in a
Yeah.
variety of contexts, whether you're a coach like me or in a role like you, to be able to give them a safe space to kind of talk it through, because it gets so confusing when you're in a system that isn't working for you to know, is it you? Is it them?
Yeah.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
a little bit of both. I mean, it's really, really important. So for people who are listening in, what are the signs that should start to tell you, maybe I should consider a breakup?
Yeah. It's funny because I think especially for the women advisors who I work with, in your gut, you're feeling these things, right? Some of the signs that I talk about are your firm controlling the money. That's always a big sign. It's all the same signs you might want to break up with a person too, but if they don't celebrate you. I've had so many women who are out doing cool things in the industry. They're winning awards, they're getting designations, and their firm doesn't celebrate any of it. The company's controlling their time. They have these meetings they have to be at that are not beneficial to them in any way. They're controlling your appearance. They're preventing you from bettering yourself. There's these promises, but there's nothing that's delivered. Again, it's all the same reasons you would know that there wasn't a future in a relationship with another person. And they manifest themselves in different ways for different advisors and firms. But I think especially the women, that gut feeling that you have that something might not be quite right is usually a sign that any of these signs are probably happening, and it could be a reason to break up.
I have to ask one follow-up. In what ways are people controlling their appearance?
Yeah. This is an interesting one. There's a couple things. So I think about on social media, right? Your ability to maybe, you have a brand image, that your company, you have to stay within these guidelines or whatever. That's fine, right? But they may control content that you could put out or how you talk about certain things that really prevents you from best helping your clients or appealing to the type of folks that you want to help with. There's certain firms where those guidelines are so restrictive that if you go to look up an advisor at that firm in Texas and another advisor at that firm in San Diego, you're going to look exactly the same. And I think that sort of controlling is definitely something that prevents advisors from finding new business, showing up authentically, working with the types of clients that they want to serve.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. I was thinking more, and it could probably be this as well, but it would be certainly very subtle if someone was making comments about your appearance, or if you're a Black or brown woman and there was an expectation
Yep.
that you look a certain way that isn't authentic to you.
Yep.
But certainly
No,
it makes.
that's an example too, Kathleen. I think about women who have told me, that they have to wear their hair a certain way. They couldn't wear certain colors in the office. They have to wear heels instead of flats. There is a lot of that falls under that category too. It definitely manifests itself in a few different ways.
Wow. It's interesting. I'm always surprised when I hear this stuff, even though I hear it from clients, and I guess there's always been this hope that we're beyond this. But I guess in certain cultures, Alanah, we are not. So I know the decision to stay versus go is really hard. And
Yeah.
I see a lot of women who become very ambivalent about, first of all, they go through this phase of, is it me? Also very much like an abusive relationship. Like, is it
Yep.
my fault? Is it something I'm doing? And then
Yep.
they get to a place where they really want to go, but they're really, it's risky financially. It might be risky in terms of, well, what if I don't like the next place?
Yep.
So how do you help the people you work with decide if they should stay or go?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you're right about all those things, right? There is usually that question, is it me? Is this normal? Then there's whatever that next phase is. You would know the psychology behind this, right? Of like, they can change. They've promised me that they're going to do better.
Yeah, bargaining. It's bargaining. Yep.
Yep. So that happens as well. But I think, the deciding to stay or leave often comes down to the same way if you were breaking up with a significant other that you were financially in some way tied to, there is a risk and reward assessment there. So, same with the woman I was telling the story about, right? That was part of our assessment that we did. What were the things in her personal and professional situation that were at risk? I have an advisor I'm working with right now that has a really aggressive contract with his team. If he leaves and tries to take clients that he's been working with, they're going to sue him, right? So that's a major risk. That's something that we're weighing out in his decision to stay or go. Is it worth leaving and trying to take some clients potentially that would ask to come with him since he cannot solicit them, and getting sued? Or do we start from scratch and have to build from zero? And if so, what's the plan for that? So there is a risk tolerance, a risk capacity assessment there that happens with any of these advisors, and trying to figure out if those risks make sense to stay or to go. I will say, all of the advisors that I work with, we typically are going to build a pro forma of some sort early on in the process. Usually this is just a big picture, but what are we losing? What are we leaving behind? What do we have to gain in making a change? And, a lot of this being monetary, some of it being things like that control, the creative freedom, the autonomy, those things that come with that. And that can be really helpful just from the beginning to see you're not going to have to be living off of ramen, and that you could pay your bills. If we've got those questions answered, then we have a little more freedom to explore and see what our options are, knowing that we're not going to be at rock bottom.
Yeah, I think, I see somebody I'm working with right now. It's a big financial, at least anticipated financial risk. One of
Mm-hmm.
the assignments is to go ahead and really take a deep dive into that,
Mm-hmm.
and see if the fear is actually true or not. But I certainly, different career path, but earlier on in my career, I was in finance and I changed to psychology. And I equate leaving the money behind as like jumping off a cliff in slow motion. And I landed on my feet, and I've made a lot more than I would have made had I stayed,
Yep.
and certainly got a lot more personal and career satisfaction. But it can be really hard to take that leap.
Yeah.
So it sounds like really doing that risk analysis. Now, you just mentioned the financial risk and certainly the risk of being sued. Are there any other risks that people should be thinking about when they're evaluating making a move?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple risks. There's the risk that you are not leaping into something better. So that can be really scary, right? Sometimes the devil that you know is better than the one that you don't. And I think that comes up a lot. Like, is the grass really greener at some other firm? Aren't I going to have other issues somewhere else? And that's true. There will be things at any given firm or team that's going to be challenging, and trying to assess that. It can be helpful to have a partner who maybe knows those firms or is assessing it with you. That's a lot of what I do in those situations. There's, I think it goes back to the financial risk, but there is a risk sometimes when you don't have, you're not coming from a protocol firm, you may not own your clients, and you are working under the assumption that those clients might reach out to you, there's the risk that those clients don't see you as a trusted advisor. That one really plays with advisors' heads
Yeah,
because
I can imagine.
yeah, there's no green light that turns on over a client's head when they're yours.
Wouldn't it be
So
great if there was?
oh, I know. I talk about that all the time. So I think that's a risk. There's the legal stuff, obviously getting sued, but there's so much in terms of privacy laws at the state level, regulatory stuff from SEC and FINRA that certainly create risks there that all need to be considered. And then
Yeah.
the last thing I would say is just like relationship risks, Kathleen, of like burning bridges, somebody that decides to talk bad about you and, reputation risk that comes with that. All of those things would fall under those risks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's hard to leave and leave professionally, but I believe it can be done.
Yeah.
The reputation risk, it depends how sick the system is you're leaving, how
Mhm.
much they will throw you under the bus, and that isn't
Mhm.
always in your control. But yes, I can certainly understand in this industry, your reputation is certainly very, very valuable. So we're with Alanah Phillips. We're talking about breaking up with your broker dealer. If it's ever anything you thought about, stay tuned. We'll be back after this quick break.
Feeling exhausted from the constant struggle to communicate your true value? Are you battling the fear and uncertainty that often accompany building a service-based business? If so, the Unleash Your True Value private coaching program could be the solution you've been searching for. Designed by Kathleen Burns Kingsbury, wealth psychology expert and money mindset coach for the ambitious woman poised to elevate her business to new heights. Find out if the program is right for you. Simply email kbk@kbkwealthconnection.com now to set up a free consultation.
Today, we are talking about breaking up with your broker dealer. We have an expert on that, someone who's giving us quote unquote broker dealer relationship advice, Alanah Phillips. And just before the break, we were talking a little bit about the risks that are involved and how you kind of look at, should I stay? Should I go? I want to talk a little bit and switch a little bit to options. So if you decide that you want to leave your broker dealer, like how do you start to evaluate what's out there and what your opportunities are or potential opportunities?
Yeah, it's a good question. I always start with the advisors that I work with some education around the landscape of the industry, Kathleen, because I think that this is a area, even very experienced advisors, when I walk through this, are a little fuzzy on it sometimes. So it's helpful. On the spectrum, there's high risk, high reward on the far right side, low risk, low reward on the far left side, and everything in between. So each firm in the industry, each opportunity that they might evaluate likely falls somewhere on this spectrum. So depending on their risk tolerance, their risk capacity, and their goals, we can start to figure out maybe where on this spectrum we'd find opportunities that align with what they're looking for. So the woman I mentioned at the outset of the conversation had a very high risk capacity because of her personal situation. She had a medium high risk tolerance. She knew she could develop business. She was willing to leap into this scary place, which came with, a lot of planning and therapy that we did, I will say, quote unquote, in the process leading up to that. And her goals were really aligned with a more independent firm. So for her, that put us on that far right quartile of the spectrum, looking at independent broker dealers, hybrid RIAs, and RIA structures. That's what matched her. I have plenty of other advisors I work with who are looking for lower risk sort of situations. Maybe they are trying to navigate being a single mom and having to pay her mortgage and again, make sure the kids are not having to eat ramen and those things are safe and secure. Some of the places that have a more steady salary and benefits, a structure to work within somewhere in that left quartile of the spectrum might be a better fit. So I think understanding each advisor's needs there and talking through those areas of the spectrum can help at least give us a start of what sorts of opportunities we should explore from there.
Yeah, no, I love that matrix and the spectrum. I think that's really important. And it sounds like you individualize really the attention and the assessment and what opportunities you're going to introduce people to. One of the things that I think is useful, and I'd love to get your feedback, is to have and I primarily work with women, but to have the advisors do some informational interviewing to kind of, if they
Mhm.
don't understand what the opportunities are, or they want to explore different channels within financial services. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh yeah. No, and I think often what I do is again, well, that exploratory educational conversation we have, and I'll place some of the firms that maybe they have talked to or they're thinking about talking to or they're familiar with somewhere on that spectrum. I can give them some advice on again what sliver of that spectrum or half of that spectrum I might focus in on, and then usually I'll shortlist. Here's 4 or 5 firms that fit at different points in that section that we talked about that makes sense for you. And please go on dates with them, right? Have a first date, see if it's worth exploring more with them. If not, you're going to learn a little bit about that direction. And usually, having those comparisons of a couple firms at different points on the spectrum is really helpful for us figuring out which direction they should focus in on and doubling down on that direction from there.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, there's nothing like getting kind of some of the inside scoop without all the pressure of an interview.
Totally.
So you've given us a lot to think about, especially if someone's listening in and they're thinking about leaving. If someone's, listening in and isn't thinking about leaving, you probably noticed how awesome the culture is that you're working in. I'm wondering, and this is a broad question, but as we kind of wind down today on the podcast, is there one piece of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Yeah. This is a tough one, Kathleen, because there's certainly a lot of stuff. But I think about something that has inspired certainly wanting the women, especially in my network and advisors being my main clients, to make more money and have more fun is the tagline that I use to describe what I want to accomplish. But I know for myself, getting into this industry, there was some risk with that. I left a career that I, thought I was going to have a future in human resources. I think about, I grew up in a very religious community that I left. I have been in relationships that I've left. And those were always really scary things. But I have found a trend that leaving those places always led me to something that was better. There's no way I could be in the amazing relationship that I'm in now if I hadn't left that other one. There's no way I could do the work that I do today if I hadn't left those other places. And so I think for the listeners who, even if you are in a great situation, I think being open to the idea that there could be more out there for you, being open to those opportunities and exploring them. Those are the times that I find advisors end up in situations they didn't even realize were possible because they were open to exploring those ideas.
Great advice. So it's kind of like the saying where when you shut one door, another one opens.
Hmm.
And certainly these transitions are bumpy and they're scary, and they're often really rewarding once you get to the other side. So I'm really glad that you partner with people to help them through this process. Clearly, very knowledgeable about the different options. And so, tell me and also the people who are listening in, where can we find out more about your work, and tell us kind of the latest, greatest thing you're up to?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I am very active on LinkedIn. You can also go to alanahphillips.com. That houses anything that I'm working on because there's lots of fun stuff happening on the Advisor Launch Lab side where we bring in new folks to the industry and help teams to train them and get them up to speed with the goal of retaining them. You can see if I'm speaking somewhere that you're going to be, and you can see some of these breakup signs. There are links so you can download the signs that it might be time. So lots of good tools on there. and always happy to connect and have a conversation with advisors. I just say, reach out. My calendar is readily available. It's my mom's nightmare, Kathleen, that my cell phone number and contact information is so readily available on the internet. But I think to be available to advisors to have those conversations, there's so many times where I've had a conversation with someone and they didn't know who to go to. I have no idea how they've found me, but they heard a podcast or they saw a post that I did on LinkedIn and they've been a ghost follower of some sort. And I'm able to help them avoid a bad decision or think through those options and what's possible. And that's a gratifying part of the work, is hearing about where they go next, even if we don't end up working together, just to be a resource to them.
Well, I love the work that you're up to, and I have a smile on my face after hearing all that you're up to in the industry, because I really do think we can change it for the better. So thank you so much, Alanah, for breaking money silence with me today.
Thanks for having me, Kathleen. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Breaking Money Silence, hosted by Kathleen Burns Kingsbury, a wealth psychology expert, author, and founder of KBK Wealth Connection. If you like what you heard today, be sure to subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast app and leave a review. Also, share this episode with your friends and family. It is a great way to get the conversation started. For more money talk tips and information, or to hire Kathleen to speak at your next event, go to www.breakingmoneysilence.com.